Welcome to SparkBizCast, the podcast about igniting your business spark, where we talk with business owners and experts in law, advertising, finance, and more to spark your innovative idea into a full-fledged enterprise. Welcome, everyone, to the SparkBizCast, the podcast about igniting your business spark, where we discuss all facets of starting and managing your own business. So this is our inaugural episode today on protecting your intellectual property. And today we have with us a very special guest. Sabrina Gardina is a content creator, business owner, and the human behind Love Margot. She's also a fierce protector of her intellectual property, and not only did this woman file a trademark and get it registered at the USPTO, but this incredible woman was the first female to bring a copyright infringement case at the Copyright Claims Board. In fact, her first case was number 18 on the CCB board's docket. She works with major pet brands promoting a top pedigree of pet products and is just an all-around great person, mom, and dog mom. Sabrina, welcome to this show and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. What an incredible introduction. Thank you. Really. It's crazy that I was number 18. I didn't even know that. I mean, I know that I was one of the first dozen or so to get on, but I didn't know it was that early in the game. Wow.
You were number 18, yes. And you were the first one to actually get it. I guess I won't go into the details, but you had settled that particular case.
Yes. So I filed the claim and we settled shortly afterwards. So I think I was the first one to actually close a case.
Correct. Yes. Under positive terms, right? So it wasn't dismissed. It was settled basically.
Right.
And so for those of you who are not familiar with the CCB, basically this is a Copyright Claims Board. Back in 2020, Congress passed the CASE Act, and it allowed people to bring a cheaper alternative to copyright infringement claims in front of the Copyright Office. So it's a board. It's like small claims court in a sense. You have to voluntarily enter into it. So both parties have to voluntarily decide to be part of the CCB. And once, and Sabrina will talk about this, if you decide to go this route and once you've begun the process, you have essentially lost your ability to then bring a federal case in civil court. So first, on that note, I am not an attorney. Sabrina's not an attorney. This is not legal advice. This is strictly for educational, informational purposes. So on that note, Sabrina, can you tell us what happened with your first case, or even the case that you recently had with Petco?
Sure. So the case with Petco, I filed the claim. It's a bunch of paperwork that you have to do. You send it in, the paperwork has to be served. So then you have to hire a process server, and then the proceedings start. And it's really very streamlined, but once you get into the guts and glory of it, it does get very complicated. So I did spend, a lot of time researching how to properly prepare the claim, how to properly do the service. Like if you make a mistake, even just in the service, the whole thing can end right then and there. So
yes, I've seen that.
Yeah. So
real quickly, let me tell the audience how I found you. So I have been looking into copyright infringement litigation. So I had something similar happen to me a few months back. I'm still within my statute of limitation of filing an infringement case, but I had found out about the CCB and I looked into some of the cases, and yours was the one that I pulled up. And what was interesting about the CCB is that you technically can file for damages up to $30,000. But as I was telling Sabrina before we got started, I have dug into 820 cases at the CCB that have since closed, and of that, only 15 cases have actually resulted in award for the plaintiff. And the highest amount that was awarded was about $10,000. Most were significantly less. Now, In the case of Sabrina, can you tell us what your award was after what? How many months or years were you in the CCB with Petco?
It was almost 2 years, and it was like a year and 7 or 8 months, something like that. And I was only awarded $825.
This is one of those situations where Congress had good intentions, but then the actual implementation by the government agency, I think, is falling short of
Yeah.
what the expectations were. So I don't know if it's really well known how little respect, in a sense, they are giving people at the CCB. And I think this is a big issue because when you file in the CCB, like I said, you lose your rights to the federal case. And I think a lot of people are not aware of this. And the process is almost as hard, if not more difficult, than just filing in federal court.
Right, right, exactly. And I think, so for me, when we were into the middle of it, and let me just backtrack. We had some settlement conferences, and there was conversation between me and the board, and then they would separate and then go to Petco, and Petco would have like their private space with the board, and we would have like individual private conversations trying to reach a settlement before it went on to the next stage. Which we were never able to do. But in the middle of that settlement conference, I mean, to say this as nicely as possible, like they didn't take it seriously at all. There was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of joking around, and I was like, I don't think any of this is funny. Like I'm really serious about this, and I'm offended that you're laughing.
I'm
Like
part
this
of the
is,
CCB, correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes, like this is hard work. And um there's just, to your point, the respect, like there was just no respect for creators, whether you are creating video or you're into photography or writing a piece, like that, a lot goes into that, and there has to be respect. And there was like, at one point, when the conference was over, I was literally on Google, and I was like, is the CCB run by volunteers? Because I was like, I was just trying to give them some sort of benefit of the doubt of like,
Sure.
maybe, like this isn't being handled by like the proper figures. But after like, then I was in this deep dive of like, well, who's behind the CCB, and like how educated are they on today's generation of social media and social media monetization, and how creators are working that money piece of it, because they are just so ill-informed and uneducated on that I think that was a big disconnect. And that's why
That's
they thought it was funny when they were like, so how much are you seeking? And I said, $30,000. And he laughed, and he just kept laughing. And I was like, this is not funny. Like, this is how a lot of people create a living. This is how a lot of people monetize on their social media channels. And I think that there's that piece that they just don't understand.
And I think that goes back to the piece we were talking about. So there is an educational issue here when it comes to, for example, social media managers like at
Yeah,
Petco. So we had talked about how there is a lack of knowledge on many of these corporate social media managers of law, of copyright laws.
right,
So,
right.
what a lot of people need to understand is when you create a reel or you take a selfie, a photograph, you create a book, a writing, whatever it may be, that is your original work. And when somebody takes it, they're infringing on your copyright. Now, when you actually file a copyright application and get granted a registration at the US Copyright Office, you have really powerful enforcement abilities. Now, that's another aspect that creators have to understand is that
Yeah.
if you are monetizing your social media, you need to be regularly filing copyrights on that. So, and can you tell me, for the reel that Petco had taken, did you originally file a copyright on that prior to filing the CCB complaint?
No, no. And so that was a major problem for me. You know, in the beginning, I always thought like, well, it's my material. It doesn't matter. I publicized it first. It doesn't matter if I actually have a copyright certificate on this piece or not. But when you go to court, in the eyes of the court, it does matter. And so the difference was if I had registered it even a day before they stole that piece, there's that difference of statutory damages and actual damages. So had it would have been a slam dunk. If I had had it registered before they stole the content, I could have done the statutory damages. The problem was for me was that as a creator, going back to what I said before, at that point, I had to actually prove to them with documentation now my actual damages. And so for me, brands that I was working with at the time, past, present, or future, contracts that I provided, I redacted a lot of the information because of NDAs and so forth, and to sort of protect my relationship with brands that I have that are ongoing. I don't want to basically open up this can of worms where I'm like, here's what I make, this is what these brands pay me, and this is what I do for them, where it's not respectful for either party to sort of like open up that information to the public, because the CCB is open to the public. So, giving them redacted information, I guess, wasn't sufficient.
Right. And
But
kind of back to that. Yes. So
the
typically,
other, I don't want to interrupt you, but the other thing that was really important, and this I also didn't know. So in addition to having that piece with having a copyright certificate before the infringement took place, they also in my reel I had the copyright logo, Love Margot. This piece is copyrighted. If you would like to use this in any of your social channels or whatever, please email me or whatever for permission.
so you
So
had that when you
I
published
had that in it, right? So they took the reel, put it on their social media channel, stripped out all the language, put their own caption. So now we're at willful infringement. So then I said to them, well, even though I didn't meet the statutory guidelines because I didn't have the certificate, this was willful infringement. They stripped the language out of it and used it and then redid their own caption on their social channels. And so that's another piece, is that the CCB does not get involved in willful infringement, which I also didn't know.
correct.
But we were so many stages into the game that both parties would have had to agree to opt out for me to even bring it to federal court, which would have been an even bigger award, being that they took out the copyright and did what they want with it.
That's correct. Yes. And so, kind of back on that note, so to qualify for statutory damages, you want to have filed that copyright application basically within 3 months of its publication. So
Right.
that's why I was telling you once a month, kind of like what I do, I gather up all my reels or my photographs and I put it into one and file a copyright application, because it's similar with trademarks. People
Right.
don't realize that you need a trademark until somebody steals your brand name.
Yeah,
You don't know
exactly.
you need a
Right.
copyright until somebody steals your work, and by then it's too late.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's a
So,
shame.
yeah.
It was a
So are
learning
you
process
doing
along the way.
so are you doing that now? Have you started filing
No,
more? No, not yet. Okay.
and I should be. It's sort of silly of me not to, but I'm really on top of it, even to the point like where my followers, they'll send me something like, hey, I just saw you on whatever, and then they'll send me the link, and then I'll go right away and I'll file the paperwork on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever to do a takedown request. And it's usually taken down within a matter of hours. So I never really feel like I'll ever get to the point that I was at with, Petco, but that's the thing too. I've kind of let my guard down, and if it does happen again, I'll just reinvent the wheel and I'll not be able to have statutory damages again because I didn't learn from my mistake. But I should be batching. I should be batching my content and just sending it up there and,
And
you
maybe
know,
we do that.
paying the $50.
Once a month, we'll force each other onto a Zoom call and, like
Yes.
study buddies, file our copyright applications
Right.
for all of our work.
Exactly.
But can you walk everyone through how you found out that Petco had taken your reel and what was going on? It sounds like it was going viral at the time. Is that correct?
It already had around 10 million views.
Wow.
And so one of my friends had sent it to me and she said, "Hey, like you made it to the Petco page." I thought it was a pup box, not Petco, pup box, but it's
Okay.
still a Petco company.
Sure,
And
sure.
and they were like, "Oh my God, this is great, da da da." And I was like, "This is not great. Like this is not great." And then when I saw that they redid the caption, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's crazy." So I sent a nice little message. I'm like, "Hey, this is my reel. Like you're really not supposed to use it." And the person, whoever was running their social media at the time, they read it and they just ignored it. And I waited 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 like, I don't know, 6 hours or so. And I was like, "Ugh, this is kind of crazy." So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to file the form with Instagram. And I filed the form with Instagram. Instagram took it down like within a matter of an hour, I would say top. So it was taken down.
Okay.
Well, so then I guess Pupbox got a notification that they had a copyright strike, and that got their attention. And they were like, "Hey, sorry, like we liked it and we wanted to share it with our followers because we figured that they would like it too, yada yada yada, the whole spiel." And I was like, they were just trying to make light of it. Like it's really no big deal. And I was like, actually, you didn't do that. You stripped all of my language out of it. You changed the caption. You didn't even credit me. And they read it and ignored it. And I kind of just let it sit for a while. And then as more things of mine were getting stolen, not by Petco, but by other brands, I was like, this is crazy. Like this has to stop. And I actually met a guy online just by Googling like copyright issues with Instagram and Facebook. And his name, I think, was Jonathan. And I think the name of his company was like Copy Byte or something like that. And he said, "Hey, listen," and he's not an attorney either, but he's like super smart with intellectual law and stuff. And we had spoke a few times, and he said, "Hey, listen, the Copyright Board is opening up a program where you can go and you can file a claim all on your own, and you do all the paperwork and see what you guys can settle for. They were definitely in the wrong, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, you know what? Like, I don't know. I don't think this is something I can handle on my own." And he was like such an advocate and such a cheerleader. He was like, "I'm telling you," he's like, "you're smart enough. You got the knowledge. You could do it. It's not that hard." And I was like, I don't really know. Like, I just don't feel confident enough to do this. And I just let it sit. And then the copyright board opened and I called them up. I said, "Listen, I think I'm gonna go for it. Can I pay you to help me? I'll pay you for your time." I'm like basically begging this guy for help. He's like, "You don't understand. You don't need my help. You're smart enough. You're gonna figure it out." And so I just did it. And I was like, you know what? He's right. I'm just gonna do this. And I just dove in. I read all the paperwork. They have a guide, so you can just like follow all the steps. And, in the copyright board's defense, if you have a question and you're really like feel like you don't know if you're doing something properly, you can easily email them and say, "Hey, listen, like this is my first time. I'm new at this. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do X, Y, or Z." They won't tell you what to do, but they'll say, "Here, read this paragraph in whatever booklet," or they'll link you to it so that you can better knowledge yourself. So they were helpful with aspects of that. Um, and so then I just did the filing and I did have some questions for them and did the surveying and then we did all the proceedings and all that stuff. But Petco had a really great team of lawyers and paralegals and I had
You
myself.
seem
So so
little
I
like
just,
you did that.
I felt like such like a little fish in a big sea, but yeah,
But you did it. You succeeded.
I I did it. I did it and I succeeded and I won and I'm really proud of myself for all of that. I just am so upset with the award.
I know.
I can't make sense of it.
I know. I couldn't believe that either. And, even if you did have a registered copyright for that, I still am unsure that they would have awarded you much more over that. And it's kind of sad to see, but very few people are getting awarded anything. And if they are, the amounts are so paltry. It's a joke. There's nothing really that's compensating you for your time and being there. And I wanted to bring that up. Did you try to seek out a copyright infringement attorney prior to going the route of the CCB?
No,
Oh, how come?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know. I didn't feel that I didn't feel that there was a lot of money in it to begin with.
Sure.
And I didn't feel that it would be enough for a lawyer to get involved to then take their percentage and that sort of stuff.
I see. Okay. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm curious because in research, so I've been working in law and litigation for many years, and in my research into my personal copyright infringement claim, I had found there's not a lot of copyright attorneys.
right.
So intellectual property is a very niche area in law, and then when you get into copyright infringement and litigation, that's even smaller of an area. But the problem is, it is actually such a frequent issue with social
Yeah.
media, and this happens all the time, but there's very few copyright infringement litigation attorneys. So what I'm doing right now is forming a network of copyright infringement attorneys and litigators willing to do copyright infringement cases. We have a team setting up in New York and California that could take these cases, and hopefully
Right.
some of them on contingency, to
Yeah.
help creators and people like you that experience these situations. But there's, like I said, there's that educational gap where people need to understand their IP rights and be filing those copyrights, so that,
Yes.
there's statutory damages there as well as attorney fees by filing in that 3-month window and getting it granted in that time. So let me ask you this. Let's talk about the social media manager. So I used to work in major corporations, and before I was in law, everyone hated the legal team. Like, if we saw you in the cafeteria, we bolted the other direction. So I think that's the problem with these big corporations, is that there is no education being given to their social media managers, their marketing managers, on the
Right.
intricacies of copyright law. Would you say that that's accurate? Because I was reading over the case you had at the CCB, and it sounds like the social media manager didn't really know. Can you give me some more information on that whole thing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's hard for me to say one way or the other whether she knew or she didn't know, but after, researching and finding out who the social media manager was at the time, she also is a pet influencer. And
Mm.
so I was really surprised. I thought, wow, like she's a pet influencer herself. Like I'm shocked that she didn't understand like the miscommunication, or I should say, let me just backtrack, the miscommunication between taking somebody's asset or their reel or whatever and posting it on another channel, because she does create content. So I feel that she would have been upset if somebody stole her and a video of her or her dog or whatever and used it on another platform. But I also feel that there are creators out there who, and I see it all the time, like I'll look at somebody's story and they'll be like a big creator and they'll be like, thank you so and so much for sharing my video. And I'm like, I want to like strangle the person through the phone. And I'm like, I'm on the keyboard. I'm like, why did you say that? Like that sharing that is not doing you any favors. It's only helping the person who's you're like getting views. You may be bringing people to their sales platform to sell merchandise or what have you. Like a lot
Correct.
of these creators think that if somebody shares their images or their videos, that it's like the greatest thing in the world. And it's like, no, it's not. So in her defense, she may have thought she was doing me a favor, because in Petco's defense at the time, they had like 200 something thousand followers. And at the time, I think I had like 99,000 followers.
Okay.
So in her defense, she may have looked at it like, oh, doing her a favor. I'm using her reel, but the problem was that they didn't even credit me. So nobody even knew where the reel originated from. Yeah. So I feel like as a pet content creator herself, the social media manager, she should have known like the right way to do it.
Right, of course.
So
I'm
I was
surprised she
shocked.
didn't. So that happened to me too. I was in an NBC piece last year, and TMZ has twice taken my content
Oh,
and
wow.
redone it to do articles about, the Hawk Tuah trademark, for instance. And
Yes, yes,
so, yeah, a lot of times they don't even credit where they got the work from, and you kind of have to make that assessment as to whether or not it's worth, pursuing litigation over people like
exactly.
that. I guess it depends on how much they're profiting. And let's talk about that. So, in federal litigation, there's something called discovery where you're able to get documents that substantiate your damages and more importantly their profits. So,
Right.
were you able to do that with Petco? Were you able to get them to produce the insight into that reel and potentially any income that they had received as a result of that?
I requested it, and as a matter of fact, I requested it twice, and both times it was ignored. And then during the final hearing, they said, "Oh, we just can't get it." And the CCB was like, "Oh yeah, you can't get it." And I'm thinking to myself, that's not true. Like you can get insights on the first piece of content you ever posted. So they, yeah. You know, it's funny because in the beginning it was like, I felt like I was on top. I was like, it's there, it's my, like it's my claim. So like the onus is on them to prove that they didn't do anything wrong. But somehow or another, the roles flipped and the onus was on me all of a sudden, where I had to prove like this, that, and the other thing. And they didn't have to prove anything.
Where
And
they
I
didn't produce any documentation that you had asked
no,
for, right?
no. And all of their documentation was completely redacted. So for the CCB to say to me, like, well, yeah, you gave us invoices and payouts and so forth, but a lot of it was redacted, so we weren't able to use it. And then myself, but so were theirs. Like they sent in their sample contracts. They sent, it's really funny. In the beginning, they made it seem as though that they don't normally engage in content creation with influencers, which is completely false. And so then they were able to provide, sample contracts after the fact, but they initially tried to like they did a Google search, like what is the going rate of a content creator with an X amount of followers, and then they screenshotted those rates and submitted that to the CCP, and they were like, here, look, this is the going rate. And I'm like, this is a joke. Right? Like you screenshotted, you Google search this, and this is your evidence on what the going rate is. They had just engaged in a multi-million-dollar campaign with Snoop Dogg. And I'm thinking, you guys are not new to this. This is not new territory for you. You don't need to Google it to figure this out. You know what creators are getting paid, but they played like they didn't know, and they got away with a lot more than I thought they would.
And
And they had this team of lawyers, and I had nothing. I just had myself.
right, and don't take it personally. Coming from law, we're just trying to do the best that we can for our clients. I'm sure they were trying to do the same, but again, I think what this comes down to is an issue with education of social media managers. And
Yes.
so, kind of on that note, do you think you'd ever work with Petco after this?
Absolutely. I mean, I would, if they ever said to me, like, hey, you know what, we want to make this right. We like your content. We think you can bring something positive to our platform. I would be thrilled. I have no hard feelings against them. Um, they're a popular pet brand. And a lot of people, a lot of my followers, a lot of other influencers, like we all have a respect for Petco. I think that this is something that probably was meant to be harmless and was not fully understood. So I don't really hold them accountable for the outcome, I should say, or for the low paying award, because that was not their fault. But I lay more of this on, the CCB. It was just a joke.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple aspects here where it just like a series of variables went wrong and led to this, but that's almost what these major corporations need and Petco needs as their social media manager is somebody like you who is an influencer who understands
Right,
copyright laws to
right,
actually protect the company from claims like this at the same time marketing and getting their vision of the company to a grander audience. So
right,
someone like you would be a better, no offense to the current social media manager, but might be a better alignment and fit in order to protect everyone's IP and keep the brand in this good standing. So it's
right.
good that you're not holding them completely in the wrong because
Yeah,
largely I think it's one individual's mistake that just led to this bigger issue. But on that in
exactly.
that vein, you are 100% correct. I've looked through many cases at the CCB, and even your case, they admitted, Petco admitted that, yeah, we did take this, but
Right.
the argument was how much do you deserve? And
Right.
if they're not going to produce documents to show how much money they made off of this, how are you ever going to be able to determine that? And that problem falls on the CCB. They should have done allowed a proper discovery as they would have done in federal court.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. The CCB, I hold them more accountable than I do Petco. And like I said, I would love if Petco came around and said, "Hey, like, do you want to do some content together? Want to create something great?" I would be over the moon. But the CCB, like, I don't know, like, if this ever happened to me again, I don't even know that I would even contemplate going this route again. I think I would have to like
Yeah.
come to you and be like, "So
Yeah.
who do you have for
Well,
me?"
you come
Because
to me. I'm not kidding. I'm literally setting up like an entire army of copyright litigators because we see how important this is, but you'll come to me and we'll get you taken care of. This will
yeah,
go to federal court next time.
yeah,
Hopefully it does
yeah.
there isn't a next time, but if there is, yeah, I got you covered.
I just feel like this wasn't really the way it was meant to all happen. And I don't know like who overshadows the CCB, but it's just, I don't know, like even like the hearings, the virtual hearings that we did, I was like, this is like a circus act. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's the Copyright Office. So the Copyright Office is overseeing it.
Mhm.
But I think, and I'm so glad you're willing to talk about this because I think Congress or the Copyright Office needs to go back and take a real hard look at their proceedings because they are failing short massively. This is,
Yes,
in my personal opinion, it's an absolute joke. It is a
yes,
complete joke to have 820 closed cases, and of that only 15 were granted awards, and the amount of damages they were given was so low you couldn't even recover minimum wage of the hours you put into that claim.
right, exactly. And to be quite frank with you, so the filing fees for the CCB, I think in total was like $100.
Okay.
But in addition to that, there's process servers you have to pay, there's mailings you have to pay for. If the process server can't serve the other party by like the first address, like which is a situation I had in my first claim, the one that we settled outside. When I first hired my process server, he was like at his wit's end. He was a retired detective. Like he knew how to find people. And he was like, I'm at my wit's end. He was like, I can't find this woman. And I'm like, well, we're running out of time. Like we need to serve her because there's that element of time. He ended up referring me to some other guy who was able to find her. But to make a long story short, I ended up having to pay multiple process serving fees because we couldn't find the person at the first address. So I was into it for almost $800. Yes. So now this case with Petco, I was into it for probably like 450, $500. So the $825 award minus my expenses of my filing fee, my mailings, and my process serving fees, it's like it comes down to pennies. So
The
it's a
fee at the
big, big
federal
problem.
court was roughly about $400 to file a federal complaint. So
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
it's scarier, but in all honesty, what you went through at the CCB was very close to the level of work you would have done at a federal court. Only if it made it to trial, you would have had a jury.
right. Yeah, it was interesting. It was a learning curve and um I don't know.
Well, I'm
It
impressed with you. I have to tell you that because very few individuals know how. So you filed your own and trademark was granted that trademark for Love Margot, and then you embark on this very complicated CCB claim. I honestly, and you won, so you have to give yourself some credit for that. What you've overcome legally to do is something that very few non law experts or individuals have been able to do. So even myself, I'm beyond impressed. I don't know if I could have made it through the CCB the way you did.
Thank you. I don't know how I made it through either. But like, there was plenty of times where I would get off the phone and I would just be like, oh my gosh, like what is this actually going on right here? Because it was an emotional roller coaster. You know, like it was like you wanted to feel like they were an advocate for the creator, but they really aren't. And that is the problem right there in itself, is that they're not advocating for me.
No.
Basically, they just want you to prove yourself and prove your worth, and that they don't understand this social media space at all as far as monetization goes. Um, yeah, so even though maybe I saved a little bit of money by going the route of the CCB, in the end, I really lost. You know, like to your point, for $400, I could have filed in federal court. And Petco had already admitted to the infringement, so that really wasn't even the issue. So they already said, yeah, we were wrong, we took it, we shouldn't have. But it just came down to dollars and cents at that point, you know, like, well, what were your actual damages?
Well, honestly, I know it was a very difficult situation that you went through, but I think it's for the greater good because you're going to
Yeah,
educate.
it was very educational.
Yes. And
Exactly.
you're going to educate people not only on their intellectual property rights and the best way of protecting it, but you're also going to educate people and hopefully get this message to the CCB and the Copyright Office that they need to reevaluate their process because
Right.
it's not working.
It's not working. Definitely not. I mean, when we did our first settlement hearing, I shouldn't say our first because there was only one settlement hearing, but the gentleman that was doing it, he was citing some cases for me to go and look at, and he was like, "Well, look, you got to look at this," and they weren't able to prove whatever, and so then they got nothing. And then if you go and you pull this case and you look here, and you can see that they got like $35. And that's when I really started doing a deep dive. And I was like, wow, like there's some people out there. One of the cases was a National Geographic case.
Mhm.
And so it was a small hometown photographer. Her photos were used improperly. And because she didn't have like all of her ducks in a row and didn't follow the right protocol, she ended up getting awarded like barely anything also. So it's hard because it's, you know, you have these huge corporations like Petco, National Geographic, and what have you, and you think like, wow, they they'll never do wrong. Like they know the deal, they know the law, but sometimes they're the biggest offenders.
Their legal teams are, that's for sure. They employ people like
Exactly,
me.
exactly.
So
Right.
that's why it's so important that, we get more copyright litigators around the nation and we kind of set
Right.
up a network of copyright litigators that can take some of these cases and help some of these people out because right now it really is you know, David and Goliath, but at the CCB, and then you're not
Right.
really winning.
Right.
You're barely covering the hours it took you to file that. So
Exactly.
before we wrap up, is there anything you want the other social media content creators out there to know about their rights?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge advocate. Sometimes I'll even like run a story if I see that somebody's stolen like 20 of my assets. I'll just like screenshot and put on my story and I'll be like, I will Venmo you $5 for anything that you see of mine on somebody else's platform. And so that kind of started a thing with my followers. You're like, hey, you're here, hey, you're there, hey, I saw this here. And then there's a few other creator friends of mine who will immediately, they know the drill. They're going to go, they're going to file the form, they know their rights. But then there's other creators out there who are like, oh, like you can take your phone and shake it to report a problem. And they think that that's like, oh, I'm reporting a problem. I'm letting them know that this isn't mine. And it's like, you know that it's a problem, but you're not following the right process. So in the end, you're actually doing nothing. So I think that they need to better educate themselves and they shouldn't think that it's so great when somebody shares something of theirs unless they have something to benefit from it. I mean, for example, I have a couple of accounts that have 1 million, 2 million followers that are pet accounts, and they'll say to me, do you mind if we share whatever? And I have a relationship with them. So right away, I'm like, sure, go for it. Just tag me in the first line. And I have a great benefit of that. I'm going to gain followers from their platform because they have 1, 2 million followers. I'm going to be in the first line credited. They're going to click that. They're going to come to me and hopefully follow me. So I have something to gain by that. But these other creators have maybe like 20, 30,000 followers or less. If they're stealing my content, and then you go and you dig deeper, and they've got a merchandise store, and they've got, they're monetizing through a Facebook bonus program. They're making money off of they're the only ones benefiting. So it's not like you should say, oh, thank you to so and so for sharing. Like, no. Number one, you're sharing it to your story, so you're getting this person more views. And number two, they're making money off of your hard work. And another thing too, it's like, I mean, I'm sure it exists anywhere, but in the pet space particularly, like if I see somebody using my dogs on their channel, it just triggers me where I'm like, that's my dog. Like I've put in countless hours training my dogs, taking care of my dogs, and doing the right thing by my dogs. You're not just going to go and steal my video and do what you want with it so you can sell a t-shirt. Like,
I
it's
know. I'm I am impressed with you. I have to say that. And I think we should maybe consider you and I coming up with joint content, short content to
yeah, sure.
educate people on this because it is such an
Absolutely.
important topic. And again, like I said, you don't know you need a trademark and you don't need to know you need a copyright until somebody infringes on your work. So
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
important. Sabrina, thank you so much for
For
joining
having me.
episode today. I really appreciate it. I think you're going to this will make some improvements, hopefully, at the CCB, at the Copyright Office, and hopefully get to some social media managers so that this doesn't happen again.
Of course. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Spark Bizcast. Join us again soon for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe